and welcome. My name is Victoria, and thank you for being here for the very first episode of the Best After Date podcast, where we talk to people who are doing amazing things after the age of 50. So today we are talking to someone safe for me to do my first podcast with, and that is my brother, Ian. And we're going to be discussing his foray into academia post 50 years of age. So here we go. Hope you enjoy. Okay. So Ian, welcome. And
Hello.
Thank you for being the very first guest on my very first episode.
Test pilot, yes.
Test something like that. Let's hope it goes better than test pilot. So in my intro, I said a little bit about what we're going to be talking about, but I thought maybe we could, just looking at my notes here, tell me a little bit about your work background and how it was that you ended up going back to school and doing your doctorate in your early 50s.
Oh, geez.
Yeah, just like
very early 50s. Let's
yes. the condensed version, or however you want to, wherever you think that should start, right? Because I know you've been interested in. We won't talk about what your doctorate is in until you get there, but you have had an interest in this from way back.
Yeah. How far back do you want to go?
I have
some comments about the educational system.
No, let's go there. I think it's important.
Okay. So we will try, and I will see if I can recap this as briefly as possible without getting into too much detail. So I barely graduated high school. I graduated with 49.7%, I think, in my English 12 class. Provincial exam, so they were forced to pass me because of course you get a roundup. So that's the only reason I graduated. And with
the school system, eh?
And with the support of a couple really good teachers in sort of non-core subjects. So Phil. So Phil was my photography arts teacher, and he basically sort of helped me find interesting things that keep me engaged. And it's interesting because I had, an A+ in pretty much all of my music and art type classes, photography and that, and C-, or maybe I think the highest grade I had in anything else was like a C+ or a B. And
that was Phil Murray? Yeah,
Phil Murray.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of people say exactly the same thing.
Yeah, and I saw Phil last year when I was down in August or end of August, and met with Phil after, and I let him know how much I appreciate it. It's one of those things that you always think you should do, and I've noticed you've been doing that a lot online lately about sort of calling out people who have had a positive influence in your life. And for me, Phil was one of those teachers, one of a few. There's a couple others. Trying to remember, Ian Thompson. I didn't have him for many classes, but also very supportive and just a good guy. And a couple others, but Phil was sort of the reason that I managed to graduate high school and continue on. But the criticisms I had around school are more around sort of the guidance counselors or guidance. I remember doing an aptitude test in like grade 11, I think, or like end of grade 11, start of grade 12. They're like, you got to really figure out what you're going to do with your life. So they gave me this battery of tests, and it's like, what do you enjoy? And I'm like, oh, hunting and fishing, and being outside. And what interests you? Oh, like fish and bugs and birds and all these things. And so I went through this whole process for like a couple days. And then they mark it. They're like, oh, you're like a prime candidate to go do business administration. And I was just like, I remember sitting there thinking like, what in the absolute, just,
I'm not surprised.
I couldn't wrap my head around what was going on with these people. And then later I thought, no, they're probably getting a kickback from the university or something for directing students their way. I don't know. But it was just, I just pretty much walked away from, like, I just couldn't figure it. My brain did not compute what was going on. And I was like, this is just the most ridiculous thing. At the time, being interested in biology and animals and things, the only advice or the only career option pathway that I could think, or that was ever discussed with me, was conservation officer or park warden. And that's it.
Sorry, can I ask a question?
Yeah.
So did you do sciences in high school?
I did a bit. So
Okay.
I did, but I ended up because my grades weren't great in like biology 11 or something. So I think I ended up having to take like science and technology
Right.
11, which was with all the hairband kids. So that's good. So anyways,
Hey, some of those went on to do amazing things.
yeah, I
Yeah.
know. So anyways, it was just a really strange
The
sort of thing.
hairband
And
kids.
yeah, and you know, and then there was no, like, nobody ever said to me, oh, you know, if you bring your grades up in biology and math and these things, you could be a biologist. And, like, nobody even,
So they just
I never even
wrote,
heard the term biologist until I was probably in my 30s.
so they just kind of wrote it off because
Well,
of your grades.
yeah, they wrote off my um my academic pathway because of my grades in like grade 10. Pretty much they shut down that, convinced me. They did an extensive job of trying to convince me to take something else other than those hard courses,
Right.
which is kind of ironic because it was the challenging courses that, well, the challenging courses were what interested me until about grade 10. And I remember distinctly giving up in a French class after studying my ass off and having all sorts of problems, thinking I did really well on the exam and getting my grade back. And it was, you know, it wasn't bad. It was like 78% or something, but I was just devastated that I had like worked so hard. And then I still got this kind of mediocre, shitty grade.
Yeah.
And I remember deciding that, you know, I don't even have to try in these things. I can basically show up, sit in class, listen, and then write exams and pass.
Yeah.
Barely, but pass. And what's the point of putting all this effort in for a 76 or 78 or whatever it was? So anyways, so that was my high school experience. And then fast forward many years and many careers and many jobs from, well, I ended up in school shortly after as a photography student. So I did photography and took that on kind of as a career in a way, but it was always kind of part-time, hard to make a living at originally. And always had sort of other jobs. So running a crane, you know, I drove cement mixer for a bit, just cleaning up trucks and stuff at night. And,
You had a hydro seeding business?
yeah, well, that was a little bit later. So in about my sort of getting close to 30, and then I moved back to the Sunshine Coast.
Right.
And sort of fell into a little bit of a business with a hydro seeding company, sort of worked on that, and tried hiring employees, but couldn't find anybody to work steady. So ended up just being a one-man show for the most part.
I think I helped you on a couple and we almost killed
Yeah,
each
you
other.
helped me and Dad had helped me, and whoever had a big job and needed somebody to pull the hose around. So did that. And always kept the photography going, and in always kind of was interested still in wildlife and biology. Still didn't know what there was a career possibility even there. But I remember I run into a couple people from UBC who were doing some research on coho salmon in one of the small streams, or a couple of the small streams on the Sunshine Coast. A girl doing her master's, and helped them out a little bit. Helped as an assistant a couple times when the sort of the field tech couldn't make it, and help out the students. So sort of got an appreciation for, you know, academic research there. I thought it was really kind of cool.
Right.
And then in 2004, so I got married in 2003.
Yep.
Yeah, 2003. Think about that. Hopefully Deb won't watch this, but anyway. So we were married in 2003, and my wife and I decided to move to Alberta in 2004, so she'd go back to school. And I went back to school, decided to try going back to school, and I had been doing some upgrading courses, or like, what do you call it, like general studies through Cap College on the coast, and did really well, like got A's and A pluses and pretty much everything I took through that.
So how old were you at this point?
Oh God, probably, when would that have been?
Even early 30s.
That'd have been about 2000. So I'd have been 40. Right about then. 30. No,
30.
I can do math.
You lost a year.
Look, I study animals. I don't do math, right? Yes,
The early 30s.
31, 32, somewhere in
Right.
there, I think is when I started.
Right. So there was a big gap. You had like a 10-year academic
yeah.
gap. Okay.
Yeah. A solid 10 years away. And in the meantime, and I don't mind talking about this at all because it's an important thing, I think, for people to know. So when my wife and I got together, it sounds bad, but she was like, "There's something going on with you." And we figured out through a couple acquaintances and eventually with a psychologist or a psychiatrist actually in Vancouver that I had ADD pretty much my whole life. And so that was a big turning point for me. And I'd always joked, as you know, about, oh man, if they had Ritalin when I was a kid, I'd have been hepped up on that stuff like crazy. And you know, I said it kind of tongue in cheek, but it's true. And so for those who don't know, ADD is not a one-off diagnosis. There's about 5 to 7 sort of different subtypes. And I think it's 7 subtypes at the time that we did some testing to figure out sort of where I was at. And I scored like pretty much off the charts on 5 out of the 7 subtypes. So all sorts of auditory distractions, visual distractions, all sorts of things going on with me that made it hard to stay focused, which you need to do in an academic setting. So it was, you know, as long as I'm challenged and interested, I learn, you know, I self-consume books and information on things like crazy, but to sit down and say, okay, read this article, and it's something that I wasn't intrigued about, was very difficult. Like I read the same paragraph like 10 times and just be like, oh my God, why can't I absorb this? And so anyway, so when I got diagnosed, tried some meds, and that made a huge difference for me. And that was actually after being at CAP. So this was just before we moved to Alberta. And I decided, you know what, maybe I'll try going back to school, and maybe it won't be a disaster this time. Right. So, and it wasn't. So I finished I did a college renewable resources program, basically graduated with like just slightly under a 4.0, like a 3.9 or 3.85 or something. And then decided to continue on. They had the university here in the college had an agreement to do a 2-year transfer. So you get 2 years credit on a degree, an environmental science degree. So I continued on, and I was doing that part-time while I started working as a consultant. And again, like the medication makes a difference on the stuff that I'm not interested in. The stuff I'm interested in, fine. Yeah.
So the focus piece.
Well, it allows me to, it just allows me to push through the sort of tedious stuff that is not super intriguing. And so anyways, university went well, but then of course, my youngest stepdaughter at the time was living with us, and she had finished high school, and Deb was in university, and I was in university, and then Tawny started in university. I said, geez, I think somebody here needs to get a job. So that was me. Anyways, yeah. So I quit. So I in like 2010, I was the last class I took, because the way the degree was set up, it's like half geography, so GIS and stuff like that, and half biology. Okay. And the geography part, you could pretty much do almost an entire degree at night or 1 day a week with a lab, you know, like 2 days a week kind of thing, a Wednesday class with a Thursday lab, or a night class with some evening lab. So you could kind of do a bunch of stuff while you worked for a living. The biology end, not so much.
Right.
So I got stuck there. In about 2010, I kind of hit a wall because I needed to do some of the sort of basic bio courses, like genetics and things that I needed to get done to move on as prereqs for other classes. But that means I'd have to go like usually Monday, Wednesday, Friday for an hour each day. And then labs were always Tuesday or Thursday. So 4 days a week, I got to be in school, and 1 day a week I could go work, and that just wasn't going to work for us. No. So I went full-time consulting and did really well and enjoyed the work. It shifted from doing technical kind of environmental work more to Indigenous consultation on big industrial projects, as you know, hydro projects or power line projects, things like that. And then in 2015, that all kind of hit a bit of a wall. Things got slow, so I ended up stepping back from that, took a job with a place I'd always had a part-time gig for a while. And I was a manager for there for a bit, for about a year, and then that just drove me insane. So
it was wasn't it retail?
Yeah, it's like retail. Yeah. Anyways, it gave me, basically I started having like these panic attacks and I couldn't figure out. Well, yeah, and it just made me mad because I'm like, there's nothing here that should be stressful.
Yeah.
Why am I stressed over this crap? So anyway, so Deb and I talked, and Deb was the one who was like, why don't you go back and finish your degree? Yeah, maybe that's a good time now.
So sorry, this was in 2016-ish, you said?
2016.
Okay.
So 2016, yeah, would have been spring 2016, kind of on a whim. I sent back in a application to re-enter because I was like on the year that it would break. You get 10 years to sort of finish your degree if you're doing it part-time. And that was like the 10th year was going to break over during that year.
Right.
So I had to do a couple extra classes to finish it up, but I got it all done in 2 semesters and was done. But yeah, well, it's sort of the last minute as most things happen in my life. So I got that done.
I think that's a family trait.
What's that?
I think that's a family trait.
Yeah, could be. So I got that done, and in the spring that year, I was doing an independent study with Dr. Teresa Berg, who studies birds. So I was doing some work on white-crowned sparrows, genetics work, and I'd done basically I'd taken genetics class, but I'd done no lab work or analysis kind of things. So she took me on to do an independent study because I needed one to graduate. I needed a 4th year bio, and I'd already done a 3rd year bio independent study. So I did a 4th year, like a 400 series or a 4,000 series class as an independent study. So I worked on white-crowned sparrows. And she was like, you should really apply for an NSERC undergrad award, which is, I can't even remember how much it is, like $6,500 or something, I think. And it basically covers, half your 2/3 your pay for the summer, right, to do some work in a lab. So I did that, got fill out the application, send it in, and got it, and worked with Teresa through the summer and started thinking about ideas and research ideas. And that's when, so kind of stepping back in like 2000 to 2004, when I left, I was working on a volunteering and then working on an elk relocation project on the coast.
Right.
So I did that, and then sitting in evolution class one day, talking about what we call genetic bottlenecks, which is caused by basically small population constrictions and then growth again.
Right.
You end up with these genetic changes in genetic allele, what we call allele frequencies in genes. Basically, it's like inbreeding. Everybody gets more closely related or less diverse than they were to start with. So I was sitting there thinking about it in class, going, so we moved about 20 animals to each one of those locations, and some of them we know are not very well connected to others. And I'm like, man, I wonder what that looks like as genetic signature. So that kind of kicked off my whole master's program with Teresa, and she agreed to take me on, even though it was birds. And before I started with Teresa, I had approached a guy, a professor at the University of Alberta, Dr. Mark Boyce, and asked him if I could do a master's with him on the same subject. And he was like, that would be interesting, but I am going on sabbatical for a year, so I won't be here. I'm not taking any students. I have 1 PhD student left, and I don't know when I'm going to retire, and kind of stuff like that. So I was like, okay. So then I talked to Teresa, and she was willing to take me on. So I did my master's there. And then with COVID, everything took about an extra year. Yeah. And finished that up not this past spring, like a year or so. It would have been 2021. Right. It was in April, defended and submitted and got all that done. And then, so that was on genetics and Rhodes-Belt elk and bottlenecks and things like that. And then Deb was like, are you going to continue on to a PhD? And I was like, no, no way. Because my master's was fraught with funding issues. I couldn't find any money. I got great scholarships. I made I don't know how many tens of thousands in scholarships and stuff to work that paid me to, I didn't have to pay to go to school. So that was great. Yeah. But in the end, I had no money and nobody willing to give me a dime to go and collect the samples I wanted to do the project that I wanted to.
Right.
And I said, well, not to speak too hasty, but if it was a fully funded project and the supervisor, the professor was really interested in it, and I didn't have to worry about finding funding for it and stuff, well, then maybe I would. And so anyways, it all came up. I found a really cryptic post by Dr. Blaise. I was looking and I was like, oh, I know that guy. And there's this really cryptic post. It was basically 2 lines. Looking for a PhD student to work on bighorn sheep disease ecology, period. Or the bighorn sheep ram disease ecology, period. Working with government bios. That's all it said. And I was like, so Mark. But anyway, so I contacted him. He contacted me back. We set a time to talk and kind of hit it off. Had a great conversation about it. He was super interested in the subject and super excited about it. And so I was like, well, I'll get my application in. So I got it in and got accepted. So I started in January this past January.
And you had been doing you had done some sheep studies previously here on the coast, right?
No, so that was mountain goats.
Oh, that was goats, right?
Yeah.
Okay, right.
No sheep on the coast.
See, it tells you what I know.
Yeah. So, right. Sorry. Yeah. So I did some, and I'm still working on that. That's kind of sitting. I have the data. I just need time to process it. But working on mountain goats, same sort of population genetics as the elk project, but working with mountain goats in the South Coast. So it's interesting. Just had some problems. It was all fecal samples, whereas a lot of the elk samples were tissue samples from teeth that were collected for aging. So the fecal samples are a little bit more problematic to do the genetics work with. You end up with a lot of sort of interference in the signals. So still working on it, not giving up on it.
Yeah. Well, now you got a whole other.
Yeah. So anyway, so now I started with the sheep, and so far we've got, so there was a funding proposal in place before I started. That was $127,000 for collars and to support the dispersal or the deployment of those collars and help fund that research. And then I started and put in an application this spring. So we just got another funding for $64,000 for another 20 collars and to put out next year.
Great.
So yeah, and government's really supportive here in Alberta. They're really interested in the subject, so they're supportive. They've been providing extra assistance and help. One of the top sheep bio person and top sheep biologist in Alberta sits on my committee, so she's a member of my committee. Yeah, so it's been a very busy spring. I decided that I can teach a class and do my research proposal and take a class with Evelyn Merrill, who's this elk expert and fantastic biologist. And it's the last class she was ever going to teach because she's retired now. So I thought, I should take that. And it really covered off a lot of what I will be doing in the next few years, sort of set me up really well. But it was way more work than I had anticipated. Like a lot. Yeah. I felt like I was doing another master's almost. It took a lot of time. And then the other thing was the class that I was teaching was my supervisor's population biology class, which uses a lot of calculus, which I've taken calculus. So, yeah. So I texted him like in the first lab that I was teaching, and I was like, so I noticed in this formula, there's this like italicized small d and another italicized small d. And then on the other side of the equation, there's another small d, but it's not italicized. So what are the ones on the left about? All he responded back with was, you obviously haven't taken the calculus. And that was it. And I was calculus.
Like, yeah.
Oh no.
Oh no.
So of course I responded with, nope, learning as I go. So yeah. So anyways, so it's been a bit interesting. It's been a bit of a learning curve for me, but yeah.
Oh my goodness. So how long is that process?
Hopefully 4 years.
4 years. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I keep joking that I'm trying to get my PhD before I get a discount on car insurance.
And okay, so sort of step back a little bit.
Okay.
As you're heading into that decision to start a doctorate degree at 51, right?
Mm-hmm.
What's going through?
Thanks for outing me. Jeez.
What's going through your head? What's
what's going through?
What's the rationalization that you're?
There isn't any. Yeah, no. If we're gonna be rational about it, this is like the worst thing you could possibly do. So, no. To be honest, though, with everything that happened last year with Mom, and just going back to school and then working for a bit and sort of in private consulting and stuff, is, what I really enjoy is the research end of it. I just really figured, like learning about myself, as I really enjoy learning new things. I've always enjoyed learning. But learning, this is in a different way, right? So research is a very sort of different way of learning. It's not just learning something that someone else is telling you is right. It's synthesizing all the information out there and figuring out what's a gap and what's a hole that we could answer a question, and then setting out to figure out a way to answer that question. And at the PhD level, it's very much that. So, as an undergraduate degree, this isn't sort of my thought. It's sort of what I've internalized thinking about this over the years. Is an undergrad degree gives you a good foundation to go out and learn a career. A master's degree shows you how to learn new things, like new information, and how to find out new information. Like, how can I put it in a different way? Basically, it's makes you an expert in that subject. So you become a subject matter expert in something.
Right.
But a PhD is, you're now not only the subject matter expert, but you're also synthesizing a bunch of other information to figure out what is the question and how do we answer that question. So what do we ask to find out the sort of all the ins and outs, and how do we conduct the research so that it's meaningful, right? It's defendable.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So that is what I'm sort of challenged with right now as we speak, is I'm trying to come up with sort of my last research question. So I need 4 chapters in my thesis, or my that I'll have to defend at the end, and I'm writing them as 4 papers. They're like 4 journal articles. So I need to sort of present that as 4 distinct sort of areas of research that I'm going to look at. And no pressure.
Yeah.
But my supervisor says to me the other day, he's like, basically next year when you do your, so you do what's called a comprehensive exam, usually within your first 2 years in a PhD, that shows your committee or the examination committee that you are functioning at a PhD level and you can do this.
Right.
So he's like, by next year you need to be the world expert on 4As, which is what I'm studying in the sheep. The main question is 4A behavior, which is this sort of leaving your home territory and wandering around and coming back. So yeah, so I'm like, oh, no pressure. That's great. World expert in a year. That's fantastic. So anyways, so I have some reading to do. Oh,
yes.
God. Yeah. So anyways, but I have one of my other committee members is helping me do a sort of a systematic review on the subject, to keep me from getting wormholed. I have a tendency to deep dive into stuff that maybe I shouldn't be spending that much time on. So she's going to help me sort of stay on track. So that's good. So yeah.
I'm not a rational decision.
No.
but is it, you mentioned with everything that happened last year, was it kind of a, geez, I'm getting older now, I really should be doing something that I really want to do? Or was it that kind of?
Yes and no. So I mean, yes, but it wasn't that sort of rationalization that way. For me, it was more, I look at, dad and retiring and then being bored out of his mind, and then going back to work and keeping himself busy.
Right.
And as much as for decades, I was like, I'm not gonna be like him. I'm exactly like him when it comes to just being a workaholic and spending all my time doing other stuff.
Yes.
So
we have that.
Yeah, as you know. Yeah,
yes.
yeah, anyways. So everything becomes kind of self-absorbing, but or all encompassing. So knowing, after doing the master's and looking at, it's kind of applying for a few things. Oh, so then after I did my master's, so I should probably add that in there. So last year I worked for Canadian Food Inspection Agency from January. Before I defended, they gave me some time to defend,
Right.
basically from January through until I think it was October sometime. I worked for CFIA in their COVID lab. So it's
Right.
quite, it's what is it, what do they call it, like a 2-3 biohazard level. So it's quite a
Interesting experience to add to your.
No, I did it because it paid well, so it was a job.
But still, in it, I mean, based on what you're going to be doing, it must be a
yeah. Well, now is the shift, so that was all wet lab work. So all my genetic stuff was mostly wet lab, like you're in the lab actually processing things and doing PCRs, and then once you get all that data, then you do the analysis. And the analysis, as important as it is really is the sort of quick part of it.
Right.
Whereas this PhD and then the CFIA work is all like high level lab work, very meticulous, very specific. So that was good, and I was good at it. It's fine. But did I enjoy it? I could do it, but I didn't really enjoy it.
Yeah.
But the PhD, this PhD is all, it's collecting data in the field and then processing it. So there's no real sample processing or anything. I'm not doing any wet lab work. It's all computer lab for the most part.
Okay.
Yeah. So, but at the end of my master's, thinking about, I started thinking, and I'm getting older, so started thinking about, what am I going to do with sort of like the rest of my life? And because I have never had a career, that lasted decades, and I get a pension, I was like, well, am I ever going to retire? And then I thought about it, and I was like, do I really want to retire?
It's a great question. Yeah.
Do I want to stop working? And being a consultant is sort of like, if you can get past the feast and famine, as the feast and famine working for yourself, where you're flush with money and paying off all your bills and life is great and your bank account's growing, and then suddenly you don't have work for 6 months and you're just watching everything dwindle and your debt climb. If you can get sort of used to that or find a way to manage that, I enjoyed that life. I enjoyed having some freedom to say, you know what, I'm going to go away for 2 weeks and head to Mexico and take some time to refresh, without having to ask somebody for,
exactly,
oh, well, shit, wait, I had to apply for my holidays like 6 months ago and I didn't. So now I can't.
I could not go back.
Yeah, exactly. So as you know, right?
Yeah.
So, but then thinking about life and my life, I was like, I don't, what the hell am I going to do in retirement that I don't do now? So I might as well do the kind of work that I really want to do. So that's kind of what motivated me to do the master's. And then through the master's, thinking about that is, it gave me a skill set, and it gave me, the credentials so that I could go out on my own if I wanted to eventually. And then now doing the PhD, I was thinking even beyond that is, do I just want to consult or, so I'm going to sideline here. So when I was driving down to see you guys there a month and a bit ago, son-in-law and I were having this conversation. He got a ride with me. We were talking, and we've had some challenges here, and I won't get into them, health stuff in family, and it got us talking about mortality and what's important in life, and how he was saying that in conversation with my oldest stepdaughter that she was like, I don't think I wanted what the business they're doing now. It wasn't really interested in continuing on. And her saying, she asked him, she's like, if you thought that you found out you had a year to live, like, would you still be doing what you're doing right now? And as soon as he said it, I was like, what the hell else would you be doing? So, and that was his answer too. He's like, I said, well, yeah, like, it's interesting. It's fun. It's interesting. I engaged by it. And so that's really the same sort of view I have on doing this PhD is I'm doing it because I'm interested. I'm not doing it because it says PhD at the end of my name or anything at the end of it. It's, for me, it's just learning, understanding, learning new skills, and just challenging myself to see what I can accomplish. which, sat for me, very stagnant for like 20 years, right? I didn't really
Right.
do a whole lot to challenge myself in the same way.
Hmm.
So yeah, so that's kind of why, if you had to ask me why am I doing it,
Yeah.
it's strictly for self-interested reasons, because I want to.
As it
That's
should
it.
be.
As it should be.
As it should be. Absolutely. So,
Yeah.
so thank you for that. I think that's really important, as since we're talking to an audience of a certain age.
Oh.
I think it's just critical to have that piece there. So as you headed through the master's process and heading into the deciding to do a PhD, was there anything surprising that
Oh,
happened that you just were like, what the hell?
you mean this week? Or so
Biggest
yeah.
surprise, big one, the big one.
Oh, I don't know if there's anything that's okay. Let me think about that for a minute. Anything that was a big surprise.
Or that sort of almost knocked the wind out of you.
uh, well, in two ways. One, when I went back to school, which was, in my, I guess, 30s, was that I could do it. That was the biggest surprise to me. I always knew I could do it. I always knew I was, not the dullest stick in the drawer, but to actually finish up and basically be top of my class, after having such an abysmal academic record up to that point,
Right.
for me was a huge thing. It really was. And then continuing on at university and the sort of the undergrad, not so much, because it was more of the same. But then going into the master's, it took a bit to sort of convince myself that maybe I can do this. And and I still did it well, still finished with a really high GPA, high enough for awards and scholarships and things.
Was there anyone else your age at the master's level, or even when you went back to get the bachelor's?
Not a lot. So at the college, there was a woman there who was older than I was, like one person, and another guy who was about my age.
Okay.
And then at university too, there's a few people who had returned. So a friend of mine, Tim, I knew him from the college.
Okay.
And anyways, he recognized me in a class at the university one day. He's like, hey, he starts talking to me, and I'm like, oh, I introduced myself. He's like, we know each other. And I was like, oh, sorry, man. You do?
So that's always
from like 2007 at the college. I was like, oh God, that was a while back, man. So anyways, so he's a really good guy, but he went back to get his undergrad as a way to sort of improve his life. But it's interesting because in a way he had the same sort of thing going on that Deb and I have. Deb went to school, I worked for a while, and then when Deb was finished, I got the opportunity to go back, and that's what he did. His wife's a veterinarian.
Oh, okay.
So while she was in school, he was working for a small oil and gas firm doing hydrogeology stuff, and then that all kind of crapped out at the same time. My work was all kind of dying, so he decided to go back like I did, but his wife was busy working, so she was able to sort of hold down the fort. So, and I see that a bit. One of my lab mate in Edmonton, the new lab, he's a teacher, so he teaches elementary school, I think, or junior high or something. Junior high, I think. Anyways, and he's gone back to do a master's, so he's done his degree and then done his teacher certificate, teacher college, taught for 10 years, had a new baby, and actually decided to go back to school, and then found out he was having a new baby. So, but his wife's a teacher too, so they managed to make it work. But so everybody has challenges.
Sorry, it would probably be challenging to do that as a single person.
Yes, absolutely, because unless you have support from somewhere,
or you've saved up to do it.
Well, or you've saved on a lot. I mean, it's so for me, the way I looked at school was, as long as it's not costing me anything out of pocket, I'll do it. I wasn't willing, because I'm not like, oh, I need that degree to get this job. I need to do this so I can be a dentist, so I can make tons of money.
Right.
That was never my motivation or interest.
Got it.
But for me, I'm like, I will do this because it's interesting. And on some level, I enjoy it. On some level, it drives me crazy, but I enjoy it. I like it. I enjoy the challenge of it, but only if basically it's at least, net neutral. So,
Right.
and I'm not, Deb and I aren't going into debt so I can go to school. Now we're not, it's kind of it took some soul searching because it's like, these are my prime earning years. They're supposed to be right now. And I'm not earning, I'm, living below the poverty level as it goes with a stipend for the PhD. It's like, you can barely survive off it. And so it covers my gas to drive back and forth to Edmonton, covers my apartment rent and a few other things and school. Yeah. But other than that, there's no money left over. It's not like I'm, raking in any bucks. So
right. So that's a big consideration for sure.
That's a huge yeah. And for most people, that's the sort of wall why most people don't go back, I think, or don't explore other options, is unless they have a relationship that's supportive of that, or they have done extremely well. But then usually if you've done extremely well, either you work for yourself and then you don't give a rat's ass about, going back to school, or you already went to school and got a degree, and that's why you're in the position you're in at 50, so that you could retire, or 55, so you retire with time enough to go back and go to school again.
Isn't it after 65 you can go for free?
Well, yes, no. So
I was kind of joking, but is that a thing?
It is a thing, but you can't do a degree. You can basically that you can audit classes.
It's just courses. Okay, got it.
Yeah, so you can go sit in, and if you want to get marked, they'll mark it, but you don't get a grade at the end of it. Yeah, it's just information. So a lot of seniors and people who are retired are like bored. And it's like, oh, there's an interesting class on botany or something, and they want to learn, so they just go sit in on the lectures and stuff.
Got it.
Actually, one of our classes, we actually have somebody sitting in on the population ecology class who's a biologist, works for national parks this year. She's like, I'm kind of interested in this, my supervisor's class. I'm going to sit in on this. So so she audited the class. It's like super cheap. You can audit it for $100. So so it's always a good way to see if you're interested in sitting there.
Absolutely. First,
before you quit your job and go back to school. So,
exactly. Oh my goodness. So before we wrap then, because we've been almost an hour here, which is amazing. So thank you for all of that. I
don't know if we got into anything too deep.
No, we did. Well, that's okay though. That's okay. We can come back and have a deeper conversation later. But what would you say to someone who is considering going back to university in their early 50s? What would be your top 3 tips?
Oh, God.
Words of advice.
Don't do it if you think you're going to get a financial reward from it. The years you will spend in school, like a master's is technically 2 years. Like if you don't have a degree, then you got to do your undergrad. If you have a degree, you're thinking about going back to do a master's. Master's is not bad. You can kind of do a master's part-time while you work 3-4 years. You could do that without, breaking the bank or having too much of an issue, though it's difficult. There's a lot of work in it. But if you think that you're going to go like do a PhD and then come out and then work enough years with PhD to make up for the money you lost by not continuing even in your rather sort of middle of the road, middle class job as a, working for BC Ferries, you'll never get that money back. Like you're going to lose $40,000 to $50,000 a year in income minimum. That's if you're getting funding to go to school. You're still going to lose 50 plus a year. And if it takes you 6 years to do a master's and a PhD, well, that's $300,000-$400,000.
Yeah. So not just the cost of the program.
Yeah. And then, you're not going to make that money back unless you work till you're 90, which is fine if you want to work till you're 90. But, my thought around that, or my goal, is to not, to work till I'm gone, or work as long as I can, but at a level that is not, make or break, or you have to go to work this next 20-day shift, because if you don't, you're going to lose your house.
Right.
So I'm a bit fortunate in that way, and that Deb and I own our own house. We owe minimal on it, so it's if we mortgage rates go through the roof, we're not going to get screwed. We can always afford it. So that helps.
Yeah.
That's an important thing. But yeah, it's don't do it for the money. Don't go back to school for the money. It's unless it's got to be something you want to do and just love doing. Then yeah. Otherwise, just upgrade to things that professional designation stuff or whatever. Try and get a better thing. But if you're interested in school, it's an interesting process. The problem I have is bureaucracy. The problem is you get older and your tolerance for bullshit goes way down, and I find it really hard, especially at the university. And now at University of Alberta, it's very high level. It's the premier university in Alberta and one of the premier universities in the country, and it's a whole other level of paperwork. It's just paperwork. Yeah. And approvals.
Good diplomacy there.
Yeah.
But I think that's really valuable to mention.
Yeah.
If your BS detector is pretty sensitive, maybe not such a good option.
Well, it's still a good option as long as you go into
or use it as a personal growth opportunity.
Yeah. Sounds like something my wife would say. Yeah. No, just time. It's a chance to grow, Ian. No, it's a chance for me to yell at somebody is what that is. But yeah. So.
And number 3, anything else?
Oh, number 3. There's a third thing.
There's a third, top 3. Anything around? Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
So kind of with the second part, or with the other earlier part, is the bit of advice that I got before I started the master's was from a young guy who had gone to school with, brilliant dude, really smart, and finished up like top of the class in his undergrad. And then he was like, oh, what am I going to do now? And a prof was like, well, hey, you want to do a master's? Because I got this subject. I need somebody to work on this. And I saw him and I said, what are you doing here? He's like, oh, I'm just finishing a master's. I just defended. I was like, oh, I didn't even know you were still around, man. He's like, yeah, it's because I've been head down in the books for like 2 years. And I said, oh, I'm thinking about it. Like, got any advice? And he was like, yeah. He's like, unless it is something that you are absolutely super interested in and just need to know, don't do it. He's like, if you are not self-motivated to answer the questions that you have, you will never finish them. He's like, it is so painful. He's like, I did this master's because I thought, I got nothing else going on, I might as well do it. You guys willing to pay me and I can continue in school and get a master's, why not? And he's like, it's been 2 years of hell because I couldn't care less about the subject. He's like, I thought it was just like more classes and stuff, and it's not. It's all self-motivation. And then when you hit the PhD level, it's you. Like, my supervisor was like, let me know what you're doing. Okay. And then I tell him what I'm doing. He's like, no, don't do that. Do something else. And it's not like, here, do this. It's like, do something else. And then you got to figure out what else. So
okay, interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting.
It's a little different way. So the further along you go, the less sort of guidance there is in that way. It's for you to figure out.
That's really fascinating. I would have not have thought of it that way, but that it's you.
It is, yeah. It's you. You've already learned. Basically, you've learned how to learn.
Right. Yeah.
You've learned how to do research, or learned how to answer a question and conduct research. Let's say not do research, but conduct research in the master's. And at the PhD level, it's now you need to be the researcher.
Yeah.
So you need to have your own answers and find your own answers and guide yourself. And it's a bit of a different way, especially somebody who's always kind of, taking direction from somebody else. It's sort of really know your subject and really push through to understand it. So that's been the sort of, not so much the challenge, but it's a different way of sort of being and thinking about things. So instead of reading stuff and like, oh, that's interesting, and then putting it aside, it's like, oh, well, that's interesting. How can we find that out? Or let's see, did somebody else already find that out? So then you got to figure that part out. No, nobody's ever looked at it past this. So that's what I'm doing right now. There's sort of 2 theories that I was presented with by my supervisor. He's like, these are interesting things that have never been looked at, as far as I can tell, using like mammals or any other things besides Drosophila, which is like fruit flies, or Daphnia, little tiny freshwater shrimp or something. They're these little study organisms. So there's these sort of hypotheses or theories that have been shown in these sort of systems,
right,
study systems, but they've never been applied to free ranging animals or animal populations that are not lab populations.
right. Oh, interesting.
So that's what I'm trying to wrap my head around right now. So I'm reading and thinking, and a PhD is a degree in philosophy, is what it is. And so I, in my master's, I always felt bad for taking a day to kind of consider stuff, and now I'm like, I need to think about this for a week,
or longer,
until you figure it out. So I sometimes I just sit and grab a coffee and I just go sit out on the deck and stare at the birds and ponder about what I'm, I read for a bunch, and then I gotta sit back and think about it.
Well, and I think that's just so critical in so many ways, right? That we don't give ourselves, whether it's doing our PhD or whatever in the work that I do, to just sit with it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're always rushed to get, punch out the result and write a report.
And the results are never good. Well, they can't be, but they're not as good as they could be if you'd taken the time to.
Yeah, but usually inspiration comes from a long time of inspiration is hard work, right? So lots of reading and lots of considering, but then you also need to give your brain time to sort of calm and clear, so that you can go, oh, there's an idea, or that's something I didn't think about, or like that's a way I could do this, an approach or something. It's really sort of honoring yourself. Take time to really process all the information you're jamming in it. Unfortunately for me, my brain, as I get older, seems to be limited. So now I forget things like, where is my car? Where did I put my keys? Shit. Oh, I know this wonderful biological fact about some abstract little tiny creature that, like, just kicked out some memory of my childhood that's gone now forever. So yeah.
I was just saying that to someone the other day. My head is full of all these random facts that no one ever needs to know.
Yeah. The hard drive is full. So I got to trash some of that information that may or may not be important.
That's funny. That's funny.
We'll just write over that.
Yeah, exactly.
It's an interesting process.
Yeah. Well, that is a great way to wrap. So thank you.
Mental capacity. Nice.
Yeah. So thank you so much for being my first guest, and have you back again to discuss how it's going.
Yeah. Actually, next year about this time, I should be trying to do my candidacy exam. So after that, not during, because I'll lose my mind if you ask me a question like, how old are you now? And I will just cry. So
we don't want that.
No, we don't want that.
No.
But no, it's been fun.
Thank you.
This is good.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So hopefully it's interesting. I don't know if anybody cares or not, but
it'll be awesome.
There you go.
Thank you.
All right.